selfish ad here. Um, okay, today's topic may be another controversial one. Um, I'm planning to offend another large community of believers, like I did with my talk about atheism. The title of this talk, I think, is going to be The Numbness of Oneness. Okay, so obviously I'm going to be talking about the spiritual belief in oneness. Now, this takes a lot of forms, but I'm going to mostly focus on the form that it occurs in most frequently amongst the New Age spiritual community. That is, the folks that say they're spiritual but not religious, with an emphasis on not religious. This is basically a very, very popular belief system right now. It is full of gurus, full of people telling you this is the only way, this is the right way, this is it. It builds on Buddhism as a foundation. It builds on the idea of nirvana as being a state of oneness with everything. Okay, now what are some of the core tenets of this? I like to call it a cult. And I'll explain to you why, and I think by the end of my presentation, I'll have made a pretty good case for the fact that this is indeed a cult. A cult in the sense of a belief system that is human created. It has the dimensions of cultishness in that it attracts cult leader formation, the grouping of people into cults, which anyone who has been around or seen the results of what happens to cults when they gain power over their followers, or even more disturbing, over their communities or their countries, has an idea where that leads. And this is why I am especially hard on this group of people. Okay, so oneness takes on a lot of dimensions. And what's become very popular about it lately is using it as a rationalization or a basis for trying to bring down the barriers between religions. And so you'll hear one group of the oneness cult saying that, well, this is Christ consciousness, that there's this one supreme consciousness that is like source, God, that we're all part of. And if we can just unlock that consciousness within us, raise our vibration to unlock that consciousness, that we can be an active participant in the one. And that's kind of the whole rationale of it. It's very appealing as a draw for people that are disenchanted with conventional religions, because it essentially is one God, which includes me. What could be better than that? Instead of having to worship the other God, the other one God, Almighty, it sort of makes all of us part of God Almighty. And whether these folks realize it or not, this is the way that they think. And if they encounter anyone that's not part of their one, you'll see pretty quickly why this is kind of a cultish mentality. So what are some of the other reasons it's so popular? What are the bases for these? Well, philosophical basis. Naturally, it's rooted in Eastern philosophy. And for the last 100 years or so, in fact, pretty much since the invention of communism, Eastern philosophy has been popularized in the West by the intelligentsia. as a counter to the Judeo-Christian background. And this is why I call the oneness cult spiritual communism, because that's essentially what it is. It's trying to develop a spiritual basis for what are essentially communist ideas, which communism is rooted in atheism, the negation of all religious ideas. This is kind of a halfway house for those that want to be able to be spiritual but not religious. Okay, so clearly there's a political basis for this because, like communism, it's a very appealing dogma for people that are disenchanted with their current system, if that system happens to be rooted in a Judeo-Christian milieu, a system that is, quote, European imperialist system. And this is a very common thread you'll see with the oneness cultists, is they tend to be very far hard left. Even if, they won't go so far as to admit to being communist, they generally support a very leftist or else sort of anarchist libertarian viewpoint of the world. And that's politically correct right now. That's what the powers that be in the corporate media and the world financial institutions want. They basically want to destabilize any sort of successful national government so that they can take over with their idea of basically a perfect one world government. And oneness feeds into this. We're all one, therefore we should all have one government, one set of laws. You're seeing where this ties in, I hope. The other thing that is backing this is the fact that those who begin to experience spiritually generally start in one place, especially if they pursue it from a standpoint of Eastern spiritual practice, a standpoint of approaching through meditation or through psychoactive drugs, through guru direction in some spiritual practice, drumming. There are a lot of ways you can introduce a very fundamental spiritual state, which has some certain characteristics to it. Okay, and these characteristics are similar to what folks mostly describe as like the first taste of a near-death experience. This sense of a bright light, infinite love, connection, and knowledge. And to somebody who has limited or no spiritual experience, this can seem like, oh, I'm connected with God, and therefore God is this love, and God is this knowledge, and that's everything, because it feels like everything to me. Okay? And that kind of ties into why I've got this classroom in the background, because if you can imagine a bunch of spiritual first graders coming into a graduate level course with a very, very dynamic teacher, that's what it's going to seem like. It's going to seem like, wow, this is incredible. And if that's where you stop in your spiritual exploration, you can get very comfortable and happy in this oneness mythology. And I understand that. And that's a choice you can make. I'm here to tell you and warn you what are some of the risks of falling into that trap. and also to give you a good, thorough debunking of that trap, which will hopefully give you some impetus for looking further in your spiritual explorations. Because I can tell you that that oneness feeling is not, it's like getting the first hint of the spiritual you, the first fleeting glimpse of heaven, not arriving at it in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so let's debunk it on logical, rational, philosophical, scientific grounds. Okay, so ask any computer science person if they were going to make a computer to control the universe, multiple universes, to manage everything, every atom of the universe, what kind of computer would be able to do that? Would they build the biggest single computer? Or would they distribute the task amongst many, many smaller computers doing little pieces of the task, who didn't have complete knowledge of what was going on, just understood their little corner of the problem? Well, of course, it would be the latter. In fact, if you proposed building a bigger mega computer to anybody after what we've seen happen in the last 20 years in the computer industry, they would laugh at you. The days of the craze are over. They have a certain purpose in solving very, very, very narrow problems that require a single processor. But the vast majority of tasks that we solve with computers are done by distributed computing. Now, why, I ask you, would any creator in their right mind design a system that was stupider than what the average computer science guy could come up with in our species today? It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't match what we can see around us. We aren't all one. Everybody is an individual. We have our own thoughts. We have our own beliefs. Even the people who say that they're one, if you go get them one-on-one and try to get them to describe what they mean by one, you'll find that they have a vast difference of ideas of what oneness is. And especially when you get to the point where, okay, so if this is what one is, then this is not one. And then you'll get kind of this deer in the headlights look in their eyes and they're, oh, yeah, I guess anybody like that can't be one. Or maybe they're low consciousness. They need to raise their vibration so they can be one. I mean, it's the silliest excuse for denying duality I've ever heard. It's like you're so afraid of religion, you're so afraid of one God, that you make everything God. And that's silly. That is absolutely silly, and it's not necessary. There's a much better solution for how this all got started, why we're all here, what we're all doing, that makes sense scientifically and rationally, and doesn't create all of these philosophical conundrums. Okay, on moral grounds, if we are all one, as the non-dualist type people say, then there is no good or evil. And many will say, yeah, there isn't. Everything is just, relative. One person's good is another person's eating bullshit. There is evil. There is absolutely evil, and we've all seen it in action. If we haven't had our eyes pasted shut in the last 100 years plus. It's bullshit. Yes, there are different definitions of evil, and a bad definition is anything that isn't consistent with my religion, my beliefs, is evil. Well, that's a bad definition of evil. That doesn't mean that you have to throw out evil and say there is none. And in fact, if you fall into this oneness cult, there is a great temptation to say that, well, I'm behaving this way because this is what the universe expected of me. The universe wanted to experience my flaws and foibles. And it's not real anyway because this is just a simulation. This is not reality, what I'm doing here. Reality is when I get back to source and I'm part of the oneness again. You'll hear a lot of people talk like that. And it's morally bankrupt. It is morally bankrupt, and you will see that in spades if you get one of these people cornered. Cornered in that, there's the last crust of bread sitting on the shelf, and somebody's going to get it, and there's 3 people heading that direction in the supermarket. And we've seen that in the last couple of years during the pandemic season. And we cannot have amoral people be the only survivors of whatever is coming, because they're not going to survive. They will kill each other off for the last crust of bread, the last farthing of Bitcoin there is, because they don't take any personal responsibility. And this is the problem with oneness. It is the problem with many conceptions of one God. If you make anything almighty, all-powerful, all-knowing in your theology, you, by definition, don't have to take responsibility for anything. Think about it. If this oneness, if this source, cosmic consciousness, Christ consciousness, God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing, and you do something wrong, well, it must be because God wanted me to. It's an important part of some plan. It wasn't my choice. And this is exactly how atheists think, too. When you get sit them right down and talk about their dark side, and they'll say, well, it's just chemical reaction, it's going to happen because it needs to happen, and then they'll start talking about things that happen in their childhood or how their brain is wired or this or that, or making excuses for themselves, and you get right back to the lack of personal responsibility. Finally, debunking this on spiritual grounds. Now, I understand this place of feeling oneness, this seeing the light, infinite love, infinite connection, infinite knowledge. Well, I'm telling you that you have no idea how to define infinite. You have no conception of what infinite means. And your perception of infinite could be a very, very, very finite thing, and in fact is. I will tell you what exactly is going on in these moments. This moment when you begin to connect with the spiritual realm, when you begin to bridge the gap between your physical reality and spiritual reality. I'm busy right now. This is essentially an invitation to a different heaven, a heaven that's tuned to souls of your level of experience and your focus of passions. Now, obviously, you're an individual, so there won't be one particular heaven that is absolutely perfectly tuned to you. Though at a very low level of attainment, there will be probably one that really maps pretty well to you. And this is why different people from different religious backgrounds or no religious background have different experiences of heaven. There are different heavens that are tuned for each of these different people. And there's multiple ones within there. There's not just one Christian heaven, because there's a lot of different kinds of Christians. There are Christians that really believe and walk the talk and do unto others as they would have them do unto them, and live righteous lives insofar as they can define that. And there are other Christians that go to church on Sunday, maybe donate a little bit of money, and call themselves good. And meanwhile, do whatever they need to do to scrape out an existence in the dog-eat-dog world of modern finance or whatever. It's not easy being anything these days. And I'm not faulting anybody for choosing to believe something, pleasant fiction, a pleasant nothingness. I just need to tell you this, that this oneness has a very dark side. And that darkness is that if you abdicate personal responsibility, this makes you vulnerable to more experienced souls who are more than happy to take responsibility for your actions. There are souls out there who fancy themselves to be God, and who will present themselves as Jesus, who will present themselves as God, who will present themselves as your spiritual guide, your source, your Shiva, your mother goddess, your whatever. And they will do that, and they're very convincing at it, because this is their specialty. Their spiritual specialty is basically stealing souls, co-opting souls who are unwilling to take personal responsibility and ownership for their soul's journey. And they will draw you into their universe if you let them, and they will draw you into their heavenly experiences if you let them. And you will begin to have incarnations that are not really your choice anymore. They're not going to be dealing with your karma. They're not going to be dealing with your individual needs and desires. They are going to be dealing with the needs and desires of demons, effectively. Beings that have taken your soul. And this starts right here on Earth with the dozens and thousands of flim-flam, snake oil selling gurus out there. Spiritual gurus of all manner of variety who look for needy souls and pull them into their sway of influence. And they form cults. This is how cults gain followers. And it all starts out very innocent at first. And then once they've got you wrapped into their worldview, they pull you in deeper and deeper and deeper until your whole life revolves around this shit. And this is happening so much more quickly and so much more thoroughly in the social media era, because every cult has the perfect echo chamber to operate from. And we can't just shut them down. I mean, that would be creating a cult of censorship, which is, worse, cure worse than the disease. Now, obviously, if there are cults that are doing very, very wrong things, sexually abusing children or adults, mentally abusing physically abusing. There are legal actions you can take to address that. Before it becomes a major incident of a mass suicide or a mass shooting or something like that. But this all stems from these cults of oneness, these cults of irresponsibility. When you join these, this is one of the big draws. This is why these things are so popular. It's so you get a following if you preach this kind of stuff to your followers, because it's like easy. It's like handing out candy to little children who don't know better. And there are a lot of folks handing out candy on social media and YouTube, and if they can get there, on mainstream media especially, who have a cult following that is so loyal, they will listen to those people over anybody else. And that's pretty much a definition of what a cult is. And maybe you're saying, well, Rob, you're talking about starting a cult. No, I'm not. If you listen to what I'm talking about, everything I talk about is absolutely the opposite. And this is the appeal of the alternative I give you with omnism. Okay? There are very few core tenets of omnism, but they are universally true and universally provable. One, everything has a soul, and those souls are organized. The human creature is inhabited by an oversoul that controls the whole human body. There are smaller souls in control of your organs, the two most vocal ones being your head and your heart. But people can attest to the fact that they feel pulled in different directions by other parts of their body. And there are larger assemblages that have a soul of their own. A religion has a soul, and it changes over time, and it diverges and it splits like a congregation. A congregation has a soul, and that soul somehow is retained even if the leadership changes. It may start morphing into something else, but there's a sense of a soul in an organization even if the leader dies. That's why there's still a Mormon church. Even how many, over 100 years after Joseph Smith died. That church has a soul. It goes on. It's changing. It's adapting. Ideas have a soul. So, like the idea of communism as presented in the Communist Manifesto by Engels and Marx had an initial soul which drove the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. That soul morphed and changed and is manifesting itself as the Chinese version of communism. Morphed and changed and is manifesting itself as the neo-Marxism that is rife within the Western media industry and tech industry. And the people may claim, no, I'm not Marxist, I'm just progressive. This is bullshit. Your platform, what you're calling for, what you're doing is completely Marxist. Oppressor oppressed narratives to try to gain power, because power is the only thing you care about, and you'll do anything for power. And this is the soul of communism, the soul of Marxism. And this is the soul of oneness as well, when you get right down to it, because everything spiritual is inseparably political, both in the physical realm in the spiritual realm and the God realm. And this is part of the teachings that I tell you, is that souls operate in these three realms, three areas. And they incarnate in all of them. You don't get to be a god forever anymore. That's why we have the laws of reincarnation and karma. That's why they've been evolving. That's what's been going on this planet. This is why the human species exists. It exists as a vehicle for gradually taking away the powers of God-level beings, the longevity they had, the great spiritual powers they had, and making them earn them back through the system of laws that has been developed on this planet. Not just by humanity. This experiment has been going on since before this planet formed. And it's all part of solving a heavenly problem of governance of souls. Because power is most dangerous when it's as unlimited as pure thought. Look at the power that the thought of communism has engendered, all of the damage it's done in all of its forms, that the tens of millions of people that Stalin and others purged in Russia, the millions of Jews which were the victim of National Socialism, which was essentially communistic in origin. It was just a nationalized version, and you see that same thing again in communist China is much more like Nazi Germany, in fact, than it is Bolshevik Russia, the USSR. It's very nationalistic, very Han supremacist. And if we let any of these religions of one gain the upper hand, they are going to do the same thing. They are going to form this cult of high vibration. Oh, you're so low vibration. We've got to isolate you from society. We've got to censor you from social media because your vibrations are so low. And you see that happening already on social media. You see that happening with them trying to shut down anybody who has a different opinion than them. Say, oh, you're just bringing me down. You're so low vibe. Oh, I'm going to block you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to report you. They can't deal with anybody challenging their power and authority. And I get it. This is what all souls do when they are in a position of power and authority. They want to control and coerce and manipulate. That's why we don't let anyone get too much power, and that's why God organized things the way he did. Not as the supreme being, but as a thoughtful parent. The first soul may not have actually even been the first soul, but the one that gets the credit for it is the one who had the idea of setting up a system whereby other souls could learn and grow at their own pace and begin developing rules to govern souls together. Those rules were rudimentary at first. The first version of karma was essentially something like what they call the law of attraction. Okay? Souls are pure consciousness. If they're thinking in the same way, if their thoughts are resonant, it will bring them together. They are attracted. If their thoughts are divergent, those consciousnesses distance themselves. And that's the core and essence of karma. And it's been that way from the very beginning. What we've added since are ways of making it easier for souls to learn what their resonances are, because they're not, you aren't born innately with a you. You define it as you go. And this is the other thing that the oneness cults are very bad about. They tend to believe in a cyclical version of creation, a cyclical version of the human story. And oh, well, things are bad right now, but that's just because we're just ending the Kali Yuga and we're going to get into the next Yuga, and it's going to be another golden age where the women run everything and blah, 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 blah. And yeah, you hear a lot of that. And don't tell me that there aren't a lot of people, both men and women, bought into that story. And that is a purely political story. It has no basis in fact. It has no basis in history. It has no rational basis for anyone who values creativity. Why would you create anything so you could destroy it? It makes absolutely no sense. It's nonsense. We are not in a cyclical pattern. Yes, we've had destruction cycles on this planet for a good reason, because the experiment that we were working on here was not working out so well. It needed something else, another little bit of spice to add to the mix. And this is how this interesting genome that we have in the human species developed. This is why the older god species are not here running around amongst us anymore. There's no Elohim running around here. There may be a few reptilians still around. I know some people believe stuff like that. But there are not godlike beings all around us throwing thunderbolts around and, ordering people around like slaves. Well, there's folks that would like to think they're that in the global elite, but when push comes to shove, they don't have those powers, and they won't have those powers. No matter how much they think they do, they are going to discover that they are just as mortal as any of the rest of us. No matter how many wonderful discoveries they make behind the Great Firewall of China in eugenics to try to extend their lives and make them totally immune from disease, sorry, it's not going to go anywhere. There are, just not in the time frame that you're looking at of one lifetime. There are species out there that could re-engineer humans in a moment to live for thousands of years. Now, whether they want to take on the karma of doing that with humanity in the state it's in right now, I don't think so. And that's why they're not all around here. They don't want to catch karma, because karma is kind of a disease. Each new version that comes out is like a new variant. A new variant of COVID. Karma is like a virus. Humanity doesn't live thousands of years anymore. Doesn't have some individuals that have immense spiritual powers anymore. Why? Well, it was bred out of our species, and those modifications are catchy. Once they realized that the new karma was catchy on this planet, all of a sudden it became planet non grata for most of the other species out there. They didn't want to lose any more of their team to what was going on here, to mortality, if they were still among the immortals, to losing extreme mental powers and whatever. Now, there's still ones out there, and they still think that they've got the upper hand in this battle. But I'm here to tell you that this experiment is done. We've perfected karma good enough We've tested it well enough with this crazy species we call humanity to go roll it out to the rest of the universe. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen quickly, but that's the whole reason we exist here. That's why souls have chosen this species amongst all the different species they could have incarnated in, all the different soul vehicles they could have gotten their start in. Why did they choose this species? Well, think about it. Heaven side, at least the heavens of the more conscious souls, they have an idea what's going on here. And if you have an idea what's going on, and you've seen all the victories that God has had in the past in promoting the idea of free will, freedom of choice, freedom of determination, with personal responsibility, karma, you will realize that most people want to play on that team and not on the other team. The other team, pretty much, is run by a very tight-knit group of kind of board-like, powerful souls. Individual souls who are extremely good at using and manipulating others and controlling their spiritual energies for their own benefit. That's the other team. And yeah, there are factions and so forth. It's not like a dualistic kind of thing. It's not good and evil. There are different teams and they play different games. And what we're doing with karma is improving the system so that it disfavors the teams of selfish souls, of self-centered souls, of abusive, manipulative souls, without taking away any of their fundamental freedoms. Because if we did, we'd be just like them. And that's something that a real God wouldn't do, right? If God becomes a tyrant, then there is no God. Nobody would worship. Nobody would respect a tyrant. Oh, you would bow down, yes, and you'd lick their boots like people lick the boots of folks like Xi Jinping, Chairman Mao, Putin. I don't know. We've got bootlickers in Washington galore too, and in the UN. And become the boots that get licked instead of doing the licking. This is how authoritarian, dominant souls behave. And there's a lot of them here. There's a lot of board-side souls still here. Why? Well, how would you test the latest version of karma unless you had examples of souls of all different kinds, all different levels, all different light and dark natures? That's what's going on here. That's why things are so tough. That's why you see all around you people getting ahead by being total assholes. You see governments run by complete sociopathic turds. And yeah, that's kind of the nature of the beast. And this is the essence of what they were trying to convey with Revelations. But it was not a very clear vision. Because the truth is that the final solution for karma involves the multiverse. Not one universe, but multiple universes. And this solution has been developing since the beginning, since the Big Bang, which is as much of a beginning as we need to worry about from a physical reality standpoint. The Big Bang started as a universe-anti-universe pair. The universe was personified, embodied by a volunteer from God's team. Call him Lucifer. Call him the male demiurge, although there was no sex at the time. The anti-universe was appointed by the chief soul Borg, the most manipulative, authoritarian soul, child of God that had ever been produced. And we all, if you come from a big family, you've all got your Borg of the family who wants to control everybody, who wants to use everybody, who thinks that they know better than everybody else. Believe me, my family has 2 grade A Borgs that preceded my birth. So I know exactly what that looks like. And those kind of people will push to the front of the line because they deserve to, because they're so much smarter. There's so much this, so much that. They can rationalize anything to get ahead. This is how a Borg type soul is. And this is how our society is encouraging you to think. Now, why would that be, you ask? Rob, if we're nearing the end of this experiment, what's going on with this? Well, I'll tell you exactly what's going on. When the experiment is over, you're going to have a lot of souls here. Now, some of those souls are fairly experienced, either on the Borg side or the God side, and it's pretty clear where they're headed. On the God side, they're going to be headed to a future of kind of a Star Trek style rollout of karma, taking it to other planets, teaching, helping them learn to create responsibly, to avoid the mistakes that we've made, to recognize when they are making similar mistakes, especially in government, when they're letting someone have too much power, too much authority over areas that they really have no knowledge in, or where their knowledge is corrupted by personal interest. That's where God's team is headed. The Borg team, well, the Borg universe is, there's a vision of heaven presented in Ezekiel, of God seated on his throne and all the angels of different levels bowing and scraping and singing praises to God. This is what the Borg heaven looks like. This is Borg heaven. If you want a God like that demands worship, absolute devotion, absolute obedience, that's where you're headed, the Borg universe. Welcome to it. Because the truth is that the multiverse needs souls that work well in authoritarian systems. A lot of the things that have been developed in creation work pretty much on autopilot. There's not a lot of choice and latitude left if you become the embodiment of a dead planet, a dead star, a cloud of dust that never coalesced into a star, whatever. There are a lot of things that you could be, you could embody and be the soul of, that you pretty much just follow the laws of physics and do whatever you're told by whatever oversoul happens to possess you. The life of a grain of sand is like that. You don't have much choice as a grain of sand. What's going to happen to you? A wave comes and washes you out to sea. Oh, I'm at sea now. Takes you and drops you up on the land, and some animal steps on you and drags you inland. Oh, now I'm part of the soil inland. Yay! Some planet hits you. Oh, now I'm part of some space duster again. Okay, the multiverse needs those souls too. And If you're okay with a system where you just do what you're told and you don't get many choices, that's where you're headed. That kind of a role. That's perfectly reasonable choice. And you don't have to spend forever doing that. The other thing that is a nice out on karma is the latest version has limits, term limits for different incarnations. So you no longer have to spend eternity as a grain of sand. You have a limited amount of time where, okay, we're going to assign you this grain of sand because we don't have anywhere else to put you right now. And the Borg heaven is all full up with people who want to be whip masters in hell. Sorry, maybe next time we'll let you hold a whip. That's kind of how it works. It's all merit-based. And in the spiritual world, it's really merit-based because of how the death process works, the reincarnation process works. It all starts with, after you get to the heaven of your choice, this invitation, a bright light, you decide where you're headed. You get to the next phase where you have your life review. The life review is where, in the presence of this collection of other souls that have similar resonances, similar background, similar experience, you get to review what you did with your life versus basically all your competition for what you might be able to do in your next life. And this is where it becomes very apparent what your shortcomings are, what you need to work on, what's going to be a problem for you every incarnation until you work on it. That's how we choose our next incarnation. This is a great system. It's a fair system. It's a very distributed system because once you get to a point where, okay, I've got a pretty rounded physical understanding of karma. I've lived a lot of lives, some of them as a higher life form like a human, and I understand physically the challenges, the moral challenges of living. I've got to eat, I've got to survive, I have this urge to procreate and create a family. I've grasped all that, and I've started to understand that there must be a spiritual component to this to give this existence more meaning. So then you start getting aware of the spiritual levels. And as I've told you, these levels each can be thought of as a tetrahedron. 3 tetrahedrons make a whole Merkaba. A complete Merkaba is the essence of a mature soul. Now, not every soul develops God level. Some only have the 2 levels of physical and spiritual. And it's like 2 4-sided pyramids, constantly in rotation, constantly pulsing, maybe in sync with each other, out of sync with each other, with a variety of frequencies. Okay? This is where the high vibe tribe is just dumb. You are dumb. It's not just one frequency. Now, yes, there is a state of grace, a state where, you are expanding your consciousness to have a full awareness of a new level. When you get to that point of being able to expand your consciousness to a new level, that is where you're essentially hitting a new high frequency. That doesn't mean you have arrived. That means you've hit it, you've glimpsed it. So the first experience of this love, light, connectedness thing, that's not the destination. That's a hint at the destination. And if that's all you ever get out of spirituality, you're like going to first grade. The first day of first grade, every day that you meditate and you get to this place of oneness. How smart do you feel? spending a whole life of spirituality in first grade. So I guess what I would hope that you would conclude from this is you have more to learn, more dimensions to explore. The other thing that I need to tell you about really advancing a spiritual level. Okay, so let's talk about this in context of reincarnation. We live many lives. We advance to a certain level in each life. And if we're facing some really tough karma, we're having, a really tough life with a lot of relationship issues, a lot of past life baggage that we're dealing with, it may actually, in that incarnation, result in a life that doesn't get to the highest level that we existed at before spiritually. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, when you're dealing with dark karma, sometimes it's better to deal with that at the physical level or at the lower levels of spirituality, because the higher levels it's a bigger perspective. And sometimes the view from 10,000 feet is not helpful. This is exactly why, you would never want an almighty God looking over everything and trying to control everything, trying to micromanage everything. The view from 10,000 feet, you can't, everybody looks like a fucking ant from 10,000 feet. And if you've seen any authoritarian country, how the leadership behaves, the Chinese Communist Party is a very good example today. They treat the people like ants. And even the fairly wealthy, affluent ones, even influential ones, are ants when they need to be stepped on. And just in the last year, they have literally canceled thousands and thousands of social influencers that were making a lot of money pandering products on their channels, who just happened to run afoul of what was currently politically correct. Like, there was a class of channels that was very popular, still popular in much of Asia, but has been completely shut down now in China because of the backlash it was getting now that people are actually facing real hunger. They have food shortages there. You may have not heard about it, but there are people starving in China. So, the old saw that they gave us when I was a kid of eat all your food because kids are starving in China is actually true again now. And this is all because of the Chinese Communist Party, by the way, managing everything from the top down and not allowing any bottom-up scrutiny of anything. Anybody complains about something going on, their first action is to cover it up, censor it, silence it, arrest the people that were making trouble for the state. This is how all-powerful gods work too. And this is why it's so dangerous to get into one of these cults. And you have only to look at the history of any cult to see what happens to those who turn on it, who become inconvenient to their cultish leadership. They are banned, censored, killed, doxxed, swatted. This is all happening right now with people who are not kowtowing to the cult of the Hollywood woke that runs media right now and runs big tech cabal. If you don't kowtow to their idea of what is politically correct, and that changes day by day, by the way, you will get canceled. They will attack your livelihood. They will attack your character. They will destroy your reputation through false, fake news articles, misrepresentation, taking apart your Wikipedia page if you have one. This is the kind of evil that a cult will get up to. And these people think that they are one. They're the right ones. Oh, we're awakened. We're woke and nobody else is. They're still sleeping. So we have to wake them up. See, it's all the same thing. Just different degrees. This is where you will inevitably go if you follow down any of the oneness paths. They're no different than the one God path. They're actually worse because their one is something that is us. And this is the oneness that is exactly what is promoted by the Communist Manifesto. It's just a redefinition of who the proletariat are and who the bourgeoisie are. The proletariat are now the high vibe ones, the ones who are really awakened. And the bourgeoisie is everybody else that you hate for any reason that you want to hate them, because they have too much money, because they have too much power, because they're white, because they're male, because they're Christian, because they're Muslim. And you can rationalize anything from the viewpoint of a oneness cult. This is why oneness is a cult. Always will be dangerous. Duality is not the answer. All that is oneness with an enemy, a more well-defined enemy, right? Which is why in Eastern religions they say, well, non-duality is the answer, right? Because duality is so bad, it's caused bullshit. Plurality is where it's at. That's what we had back when we had polytheism. Everybody could believe their own God. And to the extent that their God fit their worldview, hey, knock yourself out. This is the way we're going again. This is the essence of omnism, is that essentially every soul is their own God in training. Now, most souls won't ever get there. Most souls don't even have the ambition to be a God. Why should they? There's plenty of places in the multiverse for them to do their bit. There's a place for everyone at any skill level, at any level of consciousness. If you want to stay at level 0, my God, you'll make a great, great grain of sand. Happy as a clam. Or happy in a clam if you happen to be a grain of sand in a clam. And anywhere between. I mean, there are so many souls in the multiverse that I can't even enumerate them. And this is another form of oneness which is really dangerous to our species. The oneness of our species being something special. Now, there's two sides to that. I mean, there's the oneness, okay, humanity is it. Everything that's good for humanity is good. Everything that's not good for humanity is bad, right? There are people that's kind of the humanistic thinking, and that's a form of oneness of species. It's dangerous because if that's your focus, what do you do with this wonderful planet we're on and all the species that we're destroying, all the natural environments that we're destroying to make things better for humanity? A dangerous oneness again. Now, the other side of it is, well, humanity is bad. We're doing so many bad things. We need to wipe our species out and get back to a sustainable level of humanity. This is the oneness of the Davos set elite, who've decided humanity is the enemy, at least the ones that don't get what's going on from our viewpoint and know that this planet can only sustain about 500 million people. Well, and besides, automation has made most of them unnecessary. We don't need them as servants anymore, and we'd much rather have sex robots doing everything for us. We do. We deserve it. This is another kind of oneness. Because oneness applies to, one party, one oligarchy, one mafia class, one upper class, one lower class. When anything becomes the ultimate power, the ultimate arbiter of right, that's dangerous. That becomes the evil. So think about this oneness thing, and think about the alternative of manyness. Accepting that everyone is different, everyone is on their own path, at their own pace, at their own speed. We're going to collide once in a while. It's inevitable. There's no way you're going to get through a life without karma. Not by being a vegan, not by being a vegetarian, not by carrying 100 crystals around and saying a prayer every time you take a step. Karma is inevitable. It's part of why we're here, to make choices, to make difficult choices that will help define who we are. And as we define who we are, that's going to define who we get to be in our next life. And if you're one of the special individuals that really wants to, works at it religiously, and has a talent for it, you can get to be a god. You can get to be a senior creator with your own universe of creation. Because that's where we're going with this karma thing. It started out with the universe anti-universe as the test bed for multiverse. Where we're at now is that every soul has a universe. That universe takes shape, is more permanent the higher level the soul gets. Once you get to the God level, then your universe is more or less permanent. And this allows us to isolate dark gods permanently in their own universe, where the only souls that are going to come and play with them are virtual souls who are living their existence at level 0, just going through the motions of pretending to be what the original soul looks like in the universe that this God thinks they're in. Maybe God's universe or Borg's universe, another. This is the thing. Until you are a full-fledged senior creator, even working in your own universe, you don't necessarily know when you're flipping in and out from your own universe. It's not a choice. It's based on karma. This is what the whole thing about the Mandela effect is. Those of you who have experienced personal Mandela effect things where you like, this can was not there. I swear it wasn't there 5 minutes ago. Or it was on the other side of my desk and I look now and whoa. I don't know. Have any of you experienced that? I have. Really major Mandela effect stuff that made me sit up and notice and got my to the nth degree. One I'll mention is a very special version of the Disney Alice in Wonderland I got to see one day. Knocked my socks off because I'd seen that many times. It was one of my daughter's favorites. I was very familiar with that movie, and I saw a version of it that day that was completely different from anything I'd remembered. In another universe. And, this weird feeling you'll get once in a while. You'll get, if you're sensitive, you'll get that feeling when you're switching universes. There still is a little bit of changeover effect that more sensitive souls can notice. And this is part of what makes life as a sensitive soul more difficult. Sensitive souls tend to be more experienced souls. A highly sensitive soul tends to have had a lot of experience, have a more even if they're not spiritual, they have a more rounded physical Merkaba. And therefore, they are more sensitive when their essence comes into impact with other souls, other universes, these interstices between dimensions are more easily felt. This is another reason why this oneness idea is kind of bad, because the presumption of most of the cults of one is everybody is at the same level. Everybody is the same. Everybody should get the same things. The whole equity idea of the woke cult is insane. Equality of outcome is not a good thing. It says that you're going to reduce everybody to the lowest common denominator. If you want to see just how stupid and silly that is, I would suggest you go buy a book of short stories by Kurt Vonnegut called Welcome to the Monkey House, and read a story called Harrison Bergeron. It's about a future where everything is so equal, equality is so perfect, that there's the highest office in the land is the handicapper general. And everybody is tested all throughout their life for any particular advantages or disadvantages, and they are made equal by whatever means they need. And so this story is about a family. I'm going to spoil it for you here. Spoiler alert, if you want to go read it yourself, tune out. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about this story because I think it's good to mention. It's about a young man who's a dancer, who wants to be a dancer, who has a passion for dancing. And his parents, his father is a very intelligent person who has a little device in his head that gives him a jolt every few seconds so he can't sustain any long thoughts. So he can't use his intelligence as a way of bettering someone else. His mother is so average, so below average, I guess, that she has no handicaps whatsoever. And the story of this is they're watching TV and they're seeing their son, who is a dancer. He's dancing with the Metropolitan. He's such a good dancer that he has to wear these heavy weights when he goes on stage so that he will be not better than anybody else. And so the normal performance is rather comical, as you might imagine. Well, this evening, he and his partner decide to throw off their weights and dance the way they want to dance, express themselves the way they're capable of. And they put on this wonderful performance. And right in the middle of it, as they're, the TV audience is like, wow, I never seen anybody do that before. The handicapper general comes on stage and guns him down with a machine gun. This is where we're headed with this insane neo-Marxist woke shit. People are individuals. They're going to rise to their individual abilities. Now, that's not to say that we throw them by the wayside. We need social programs, absolutely. But we need to understand that individuals will only grow and develop if they're challenged. In the absence of challenge, they turn into entitled brats. And we have only to look at the children, second and third generation children of the elite, to see what that gets. You get assholes like Hunter Biden, coke-headed jackass making deals with our enemies in China, compromising the entire country with his drug habit and his sexual addictions. This is absolute truth. And this is what you get when you entitle people instead of enable people. There's a huge difference between enablement and entitlement. And this difference is all wrapped up in this very spiritual idea of oneness versus individuality. And that's why this is such an important concept. Anyway, I hope you will think a little bit about what you've heard here, discuss it, be glad to debate anybody on any topic that I've raised in my show. And so till next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Oops, got to use the right mouse, Rob.